Welcome, everyone. Hello. It's great to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for the Aspen Policy Academy launch. We're so excited to see you all. I'm Gloria Molina Estolano. I'm the Associate Director of Programs here at the Aspen Policy Academy. We have an exciting program in store for you, including alumni speakers from our hub programs, and an expert panel here with us today. So to kick us off, I'd like to introduce Betsy Cooper, who is our Director of the Policy Academy. Welcome, Betsy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Over the last 5 years, the Aspen Tech Policy Hub has helped science and tech experts develop skills in policymaking. Today, we're excited to expand the work of the Hub by launching the Aspen Policy Academy. Building on the successes of the Hub, the Academy will cultivate a broader community of experts and give them tools to craft outside-the-box solutions to society's problems. We want to ensure the right voices are in the room and when transformative policy decisions are being made. So let me take you back a little bit to 2019. I founded the Hub on a hunch that there needed to be a better way for technologists to get involved in policy. I was running a cybersecurity center at UC Berkeley, and I was in charge of supporting faculty research grants. At a research seminar I went to see one of our grantees, the principal investigator revealed that over half of the websites that he had studied targeting children under the age of 13 were in violation of federal online privacy law. I was floored. This research needed to go before the FTC. It needed to be shared with Congress. It should be the subject of a Washington Post op-ed. But when I asked the principal investigator what he was planning to do with his research, he had no plans to do any of these things. I'm going to publish a peer-reviewed paper in about a year. What should I do? What should I do was the driving force behind the Aspen Tech Policy Hub. I realized there was no path for someone like this individual, a PhD research scientist, to learn how to use his research to impact policy. This individual was not going to do a 2-year master's degree. He wasn't going to move here to Washington, D.C. He needed a new way to learn how to have policy impact. So I looked around at the opportunities and I didn't find anything. So instead I looked around from my base in Silicon Valley at other models. I specifically looked at startup incubators like 500 Startups and Y Combinator. I saw how they provided novices with boot camp style training on how to build a startup. I saw how they encouraged collaboration with a high tolerance for failure, and I saw how they helped companies leave these accelerators by pitching their ideas to funders. I thought, why don't we have something like that for policy? Why don't we have an incubator for tech leaders to learn how to be policymakers? I realized that was what I wanted to build. That incubator became the Aspen Tech Policy Hub, and it has now been just over 5 years since we launched. And I'm so proud of everything we've accomplished. We have trained over 500 technology experts on policymaking, and more than 100 of our alumni have taken on government positions, from the White House to New York State Representative. You'll meet some of those amazing folks here today. We've also empowered our alumni to have policy impact, from helping the city of Oakland deploy an app that provides services to its homeless populations, to helping older adults report when they've been scammed online. We'll share some of those stories with you today as well. And finally, we built a database of resources on important policy topics, such as on regulating data brokers and developing skills for new government hires. And you can find all of those resources on our website. So over the past 5 years, we learned that our curriculum is our special sauce. We teach participants how to engage in policymaking in a practical, engaging way without requiring our participants to join a degree program or relocate to Washington, D.C. And over time, we realized we didn't need to limit our curriculum to just tech. We partnered with the Institute's Energy and Environment program on a climate cohort. You'll hear alums from that program as well. We partnered with our Food and Society program to train their leaders. We ran a nonprofit cohort, testing the assumption that we could train organizations as well as individuals. And we ran partnerships, training fellows at myriad nonprofits, the Horizon Institute, Federation of American Scientists, and New America among them. And thank you to our partners that are here to celebrate this. Over these past 5 years, one theme emerged, for me at least. There is still a growing need to train subject matter experts across a variety of fields to engage in policy. We need to bring to the table people with the expertise in their fields and teach them how to effectively advocate for policy change. And we need to give them leadership skills that they can take forward and use in their own way on their own time. And so that's why today, the Aspen Tech Policy Hub is becoming a part of a broader initiative, the Aspen Policy Academy. The Aspen Institute's Policy Academy turns professionals into policy advocates. We offer innovative training programs to equip leaders across sectors, from tech to climate, science to social impact, with the practical policy skills to craft solutions for society's most pressing challenges. We're based in the Bay Area, and we are the first comprehensive non-university training program in the United States offering this type of step-by-step training. So rest assured, our work on tech continues. The Aspen Tech Policy Hub is going to continue to support cybersecurity, technology, and AI professionals in having policy impact, just as we have always done. But we are also announcing initiatives in 2 new areas. First, continuing our successful partnership with the Energy and Environment Program, we will be building out a track of work on climate change. Excitedly, Mai Sisla, the Hub's Deputy Director, will be leading this work. Mai did not know I was saying that and clearly looked surprised. Second, we're launching a new stream of work on capacity building, drawing from our experience working with nonprofits and funders. We will be supporting organizations that do direct services or those that fund them, and helping them figure out how to develop effective advocacy work. And our plans are big. We hope to open new streams of work in other areas like education and health in the future. As part of our move to the Policy Academy, we're also considerably expanding the programming we're offering. In fact, I'm excited to announce not 1, not 2, but 11 new programs as part of our work today. These include the Policy Primer, a few alums are in the room here, which is a part-time virtual program that teaches mid-career professionals how to impact policy through a 4-week policy boot camp followed by a project phase. Applicants from tech, science, climate, and social impact backgrounds are all welcome to apply. We're also launching 4 short courses focused on helping cybersecurity professionals, emerging climate experts, nonprofits, and AI experts on various aspects of policy. So if you're in cybersecurity and AI, we want to teach you how to communicate for policy change. Young climate leaders, we want to teach you to have policy impact. And nonprofits, we want to help you figure out how to navigate policy in this new landscape where the Supreme Court has dramatically changed how governments regulate policy. In addition to these courses, which are all free and open for application, we now will regularly have webinars on topics like Policy 101 or Communications 101, how to write a public comment, how to write an op-ed. Every month we'll be opening more registrations for webinars. So we hope you will consider applying to one of our programs that are launching today and continuing to check our website regularly for upcoming programs. We hope you help us spread the word about these programs to our network, and we hope you stand alongside us in our goal of democratizing policymaking. Everyone deserves to have a voice in seeking to make change. Over the rest of today's program, you'll hear alumni of the Aspen Tech Policy Hub share stories about their journey to policy impact. You'll hear from an expert panel on why policy change is so important in this environment, and we hope this inspires you to consider adding your voice to the conversation. Please reach out if you're interested in partnering with us, and so that we can all change the way policy is made once and for all. Thank you. Over to Gloria.
Thank you so much, Betsy. Now I'm excited to welcome some of our current and former fellows to share more about their journey to policy impact. First, you'll hear from Marcela Escobar Alava, who's an alumnus of the Tech Executive Leadership Initiative. Marcela is the Deputy Director of Technology at the White House and is now Chief Information Officer of the Social Security Administration. Sorry, former Deputy Director of Technology at the White House. 2 jobs. She'll be followed by Emma Crow-Willard, who's an alumnus of our 2022 climate cohort and is the managing producer at Climate Now, where she oversees climate communication campaigns. And finally, you'll hear from Raylene Young, who's an alumnus of our Winter 2020 Fellowship and the former Chief of Staff of the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations and Executive Director of the General Services Administration Technology Modernization Fund. I'm going to pass it over to Marcela to kick us off.
Thank you, everyone. So my name is Marcela Escobar Alava, and like you heard, I am the Chief Information Officer for the Social Security Administration. So I would really like to credit the Hub for introducing me to the world of federal service through the Tech Executive Leadership Initiative, or TELI. 5 years ago, I got the call that said, "Hey, how'd you like to work in federal government?" I said, "Nope, nope, don't want to do that, too bureaucratic, don't want to do that." And then I learned by people who had been there before me what it was like and what kind of impact you could have by actually bringing your skills to the table at the federal government. And so I was interested in looking for an opportunity that really provided me greater impact and was able to leverage my skills in technology, strategy, and execution. And I wanted to spend more time from my career, having spent about 20 years in the private sector. I spent about 20 years at Sony Pictures Entertainment and had done another stint at another private sector company and a nonprofit, the Hispanic Scholarship Fund. But I was looking for so much more. I was looking for my next step. Through the TELI program, which was a partnership with the Tech Aspen Hub and two other organizations, the Tech Talent Project and Project Redesign, I was introduced into the world of federal service and policymaking. I didn't know much about the world of civic tech, and through this participation, I was able to spend 10 weeks learning from other leaders in this space. I was inspired by how much these roles could have in terms of the services for tens of millions of Americans. A few of these connections that I made during the program were particularly impactful. I was specifically recruited by one of the speakers in the program, David Ricordan, to join the White House in 2021 as the Deputy Director of White House of Information Technology. And I saw how these roles had impact through the TELI program. I jumped at the opportunity to join the White House and to be his Deputy CIO. At the White House, I helped lead an initiative to implement the first cloud-based HR solution for the Executive Office of the President, which had been tried, no joke, 4 to 5 times before me. And they were actually able to launch it this past August, which I was really proud of and was invited back for the celebration. They had gotten zero traction. Now I'm at the Social Security Administration, where I'm the Chief Information Officer leading staffing, strategy, delivery, execution, and changing the way we do business at SSA with technology and hopefully connecting more services with the American people and making it better for our employees to have a better employee experience. We are driven now by customer journeys and what the customers need versus what we think they might want, and missing the mark. So I've joined them, and I'm really excited because that position allows me to affect more than 70 million Americans. The networks that I gained at the TELI program and the Aspen Institute programs were invaluable to making this happen. I would have never have known that these government technology roles existed if it weren't for these programs. I have leaned on these networks many times during my career in federal service. I'm even hiring someone right now, part-time from the program, to help us with product management as we shape that activity at the SSA. In addition to the networks, some of the lessons learned in the courses have proven especially useful in my time in the federal government. Again, I came from no knowledge. We learned about federal procurement and budgeting and how to write effective decision memos. These have all been incredibly useful in my time in government. And even though much of my work is focused on delivery and execution, much of what I do is policy. Right now I am drafting the digital modernization strategy for the Social Security Administration that will get reviewed by the Office of Management and Budget and published later this month. Some of these core policy skills have made me more successful in this policy-oriented nature of these roles. I'd like to thank the Aspen Policy Academy, the Tech Talent Project, and the many other partners in this space for making federal service a reality and a possibility for me. And I also want to encourage those of you in the room who haven't yet done it to consider service in the federal government. take an Aspen Aspen Policy Academy class, learn more, and help us all make a difference. Thank you.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Emma Crow-Willard, and I'm the managing producer at Climate Now. And so I was a part of the 2022 climate cohort. And I had been working in climate communications for a while. I started out in science, I went into communications, I did a lot of video and podcast production, and I was like, this is great educational content, right? Like, people are gonna watch this and they're gonna learn and they're gonna make impact, but I didn't really have any way of seeing, like, is this having an impact? Are people learning things or watching? Like, we got occasional notes from our audience or things like that, but and I didn't really know how to focus it in a way that would have the most impact. And so as a part of this program, I got to have like dedicated, clear tools and step-by-step process that showed like what is the role of media and content production in the policy process and in having policy impact. And so from there, I was able to think about, okay, what can I do with my skills and my knowledge and working through with Climate Now in order to have an impact. And so fresh out of the program, luckily I was introduced to an immediate problem that I was like, oh, I know how to fix it now. And essentially the Department of Energy was funding a huge research report on carbon dioxide removal. And carbon dioxide removal is a small but important piece in fighting climate change. And the US government has a goal of removing 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere per year by 2050. And so they funded this huge report in order to analyze on a county by county basis where and how we can best do this, with looking at some specific methods of how to do that. But they hadn't funded any like distribution or any kind of campaign around it. So I was like, oh my gosh, here's this great report all of these scientists have now been funded to do, and it's not going to get into the hands of the people that need it, the like county, local, regional governments, the business leaders that are going to have an impact. And so I proposed to some of our partners who were part of the report that we do a whole communications campaign around it. And I was like, okay, the first step in order to having an impact, we have to go to the DOE and we have to see if they're okay with this. And so I wrote a policy memo and I went to the DOE and I was like, here is why we need to fund this. And they were like, yes, we do, but we don't have the funding. But they gave us the green light, and that allowed us to then go and get funding and then support this whole communications campaign around the report, which then we started in 2023. We released a website. It's roadstoremoval.org. If anyone wants to check it out, you can find interactive maps with county by county information about the potential methods for carbon dioxide removal in your county, and we were able to reach a lot of people through the website. But not only that, we've done a ton of events all over the country, and so we're getting information out there into the hands of the people who can really have an impact and use this information for good. And so ultimately, this hub was really, really great for helping empower me with the tools I needed to believe, like, okay, this kind of media work can have an impact. And now we've reached probably around hundreds of thousands of people through this report, through the campaign that I helped produce. So thank you, and thanks everyone, and you should all be a part of it, and this is so, so important to helping people to have an impact with their work. So thanks.
Hello, everyone. Move this up a little bit. So hi, everyone. My name is Raylene Young. It's hard to believe, but I was a winter 2020, so the very beginning of 2020, Tech Policy Hub fellow alumni. And I just, listening to Betsy's and Marcella's and Emma's remarks, I'm just kind of reflecting on a parallel journey I feel like we've all been for the last 5 years. Just to give a little bit of background on me, I started my career in Silicon Valley in the tech industry. And I spent many years working on complex technical systems that I think actually do sit at the intersection of technology and policy. I worked on things such as privacy controls for social media and building out international payment systems. So working in tech, I think one thing I reflected on was just seeing the tremendous amount of talent and energy and resources that went towards solving problems that felt important in those moments, but often at a higher level were aimed towards maximizing profit, acquiring users, helping private companies grow. And there was a moment where I thought to myself, like, what would it look like to apply a lot of the skills I had learned towards social or large-scale infrastructural problems and problems that I felt really mattered to people's everyday lives. So very parallel to Betsy's own journey, I kind of looked around Silicon Valley and thought, what does it look like to kind of make this transition? What does it look like to meet people who are working on these problems but have these kind of technical or policy and action skills? And that's how I found my way to the Tech Policy Hub, actually through a referral, a friend of mine who is an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. So after doing joining the hub, I sort of realized that in Silicon Valley, you learn skills that look like policy impact, implementation, and things like that. But the vocabulary is pretty different, and the systems are pretty different in which you apply them. So at Aspen, I would say just kind of learn that vocabulary, saw the systems in a different light, and something that all of us have talked about, really got connected to a very rich, I would say, tapestry of people and organizations that are working on these problems together. So there's an incredible overlap, I would say, in all three of our work, probably the people we've actually worked with to the topics that we've worked on. I will say on the Roads to Removal report, I personally have seen that roadshow be super successful, so that's an example where I've seen that work in my own work. So fast forwarding a little bit, after Aspen, I ended up co-founding a nonprofit with a fellow, Jessica Cole, that was called U.S. Digital Response. At the time, it was a new idea, really thinking about how could we take what was great about sort of what I described, sort of those skills and people from the tech industry, and apply them to real-world problems that governments and public services were actually facing. So in my time as CEO of U.S. Digital Response, we actually worked with over 200 different partners across 36 states and territories on everything from increasing access to unemployment insurance benefits, coordinating COVID vaccine testing and distribution, to even helping people stay in their homes through emergency rental assistance. USDR continues, I think, to grow and thrive, and today, last I checked, they've worked on systems that have affected and supported over 40 million Americans, as well as, I think just even last week or the week before, they crossed over to having over 10,000 technologists as part of their volunteer network. So just really incredible, and I'm sure many of those people will either have been or will be part of the Aspen Policy Academy as well. After U.S. Digital Response, I, like Marcella, joined the administration. Actually, just a few weeks ago, wrapped up 3 years of service in the Biden-Harris administration. In that time, I served in a number of different executive roles, everything from being the chief of staff at the U.S. General Services Administration to leading multiple multi-billion-dollar federal investment programs. One of them is I was the executive director at the General Services Administration's program called the Technology Modernization Fund. It's a billion-dollar program, and sort of the perspective there is how can the federal government actually work to improve its technology from the inside. And actually SSA is a recipient of Technology Modernization Fund programs, and it's invested in dozens of federal agencies and projects. So in fact, I think there's actually a program or system that you may have used before called login.gov that was a big recipient of Technology Modernization Fund funding. After that, I joined the U.S. Department of Energy as the chief of staff for a program called the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations. I left like 3 weeks ago, so it's very fresh. But the OSED, as we call it, is a $25 billion federal investment program in clean energy. And its aim is to try to accelerate the clean energy transition, in this case, through directly investing in industry. It was an incredible kind of vantage point to see the power of the federal government. And I think from both GSA and DOE, I was able to experience the government trying to make itself better, sort of working itself from within and trying to make improvements, but also the way that the federal government can have impact on the industry. And obviously on the clean energy transition front, the US is one of the world leading, maybe even the world's leader in a lot of the clean energy transition technologies that we are developing and trying to deploy. So I think there is an opportunity where working in the administration may also have an impact, I think will have an impact globally. So just to tie that all together, I actually have no idea what's next, but bringing this all back together, I think something that's really special about kind of my 5-year journey in public service that started with the Aspen Tech Policy Hub is so much of this work really revolves around a not that group, but ever-growing group of people and organizations that are united in thinking about how to take technology, how to take talented people, not just technology now at the Policy Academy, but applying it to real-world problems and systems that can really use this new way of thinking or this kind of impact-driven style of work. So yeah, same thing. We'll just echo thanks to be part of the community, and congrats to the Policy Academy launch today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Marcella, Emma, and Raylene. It was so inspiring to hear your stories. So as part of our launch today, we're also excited to release a brand new project presented by Marilyn Zhang, a 2024 Science and Technology Fellow focused on information integrity. I'm going to welcome Marilyn to present her project.
Thank you, Gloria. As Gloria mentioned, I'm Marilyn Zhang, a 2024 Science and Technology Fellow. This summer, I had the great joy of working with the Aspen Policy Academy on helping users understand if text they find online is trustworthy or not. Oftentimes, AI-generated text can be a little less trustworthy, but it's really, really hard to tell the difference. And so the project that I'm launching today is proposing that the National Institute for Standards and Technology, or NIST, make some public community guidelines so that more information about text is made available so that users are better equipped to understand if text they encounter online is trustworthy or not. So we've all seen the explosion of AI-generated content in the past 2 years, from deepfake videos to AI-generated text and images. This project focuses specifically on text, and I'll refer to that as AI-generated text or synthetic text. And synthetic text has lots of different types of risks associated with it, and one of the most important ones is information integrity risks, or when these AI models can generate factually inaccurate information. And sometimes this can be really harmful for our users. For example, if there's a false claim about health circulating on social media, that can cause real-world harm. And so because of these information integrity risks caused by synthetic text, policymakers, academics, and technologists like myself have been thinking about tools called provenance, which is a fancy way of saying how we figure out if text is generated by AI or not. Provenance can work really well in some domains. Like for images, it can be relatively reliable when, for example, we have a watermark associated with an image that lets us know, hey, this is AI generated. But for text in particular, provenance is actually really hard to get right. And the reason is that it's really unreliable and it's easy to tamper with text such that you don't retain the original provenance or watermark anymore. To make a very concrete example, suppose that we knew that this was AI generated and there was a watermark for it, for this piece of text. If we were just to get rid of one of the paragraphs, it's most likely that the watermark itself would no longer be retained. So what do we do to better protect users from some of these AI models that can generate factually misleading information that can cause harm if provenance doesn't really work that well for text? Well, this project proposes that platforms make available not only provenance information when it's reliable, but also further information about a piece of text, which I'll refer to as fuzzy provenance. And this is just a fancy way of saying exact text matches available on the internet. And as part of this proposal, we'd also like to have AI model companies make available their AI model outputs to be crawled and indexed by search engines so that this would be made available as part of fuzzy provenance. What does all this look like in practice? Well, say you're on social media and you come across this post, as we all do, that says ginger is 10,000 times more powerful than chemotherapy for the cure of cancer. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. Well, a user should be able to highlight the piece of text and click Learn More about this piece of text. And 2 sections of information about the text would be shown. In the first section, we'd have some provenance information if it's available, whether this text is generated by AI. We oftentimes won't have that information at all, but if it's available, we could show it there. And in the second section, we would show fuzzy provenance information, or web pages on the internet that contain an exact text match to the piece of text. And if there are any exact text matches to AI generative model outputs, that's where it would be shown as well. So there's lots of benefits of showing both fuzzy provenance and provenance. One of them is that this can often provide critical context for users to evaluate if text they find online is trustworthy or not. For instance, in some cases, knowing that a piece of text is generated by AI is actually really useful. In this example, we have an AI-generated site description for a construction company. And that's really good for the user to know, so that they might want to, for example, be encouraged to check out if the construction site, the construction company itself, is real or not before they put down a large deposit. In other cases, knowing the fuzzy provenance or exact text matches is really useful context for users. Back to our ginger curing cancer example, it's really good to know that the exact text matches to this piece of text comes only from a fact-checking site and from a social media site, and not any authoritative health sources. Another benefit of fuzzy provenance and provenance as a combined solution is that this solution is relatively scalable and feasible, especially fuzzy provenance. It can be implemented today with existing search engine functionality just by doing an exact text match search. So that's all really exciting. In summary, this project proposes that we show provenance and fuzzy provenance users information so that users are better equipped to understand and evaluate whether information they encounter online is trustworthy or not. So what's next? Well, with awesome mentorship from the Aspen Policy Academy, I've been able to transform some of these ideas into concrete policy outputs, including a policy memo, operational plan, and even a mock video of user journeys, and be able to deliver some of these to my stakeholders at NIST, which is really exciting. Overall, I'm super thrilled to have had this opportunity with the Aspen Policy Academy to learn how policy works and how delivering concrete policy impact looks like. And I'm super, super excited to create positive policy change together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marilyn, Marcella, Raylene, and Emma. We're so proud of all you've accomplished. We're so grateful to have you as our alumni. So let's give them another quick round of applause. Awesome. Now I'm really excited to welcome our esteemed panel to talk about their experience engaging in policy and why we need subject matter experts to get involved in the policy process. Our esteemed panelists include Michael Chertoff, former U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security, Jamina Bernard, President and COO of Teach for America, Tony Johnson, CEO of the Truman National Security Project, and our panel will be moderated by Nick Popley, a politics reporter for Time Magazine. Thank you so much. I'm going to welcome you onto the stage. Oh, the stairs are over there. Yeah, on that, but that's good. No, go ahead. It's all good. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Gloria. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Popley. I'm a politics reporter at Time Magazine. It's great to be here with you all. I'm honored to be moderating this discussion with this distinguished group of thought leaders who are going to introduce themselves in a second. As Gloria and Betsy said, our conversation today is going to focus on the importance of involving diverse voices in the policy process and how the Aspen Policy Academy, which we're here celebrating today, aims to nurture a new generation of policy experts and the vital contributions they can make to create sustainable, impactful change. So at the end of this panel, we're going to open it up to questions, so please hold on to those questions. Until then, we've got about 30 minutes, so let's dive in and hear from our panelists as they introduce themselves. Let's start at the end, Secretary Chertoff, and make our way down. And as you're introducing yourself, I'd like if you can each share how policy plays a role in your work and what policy impact means to you. So let's start with you.
Well, great to be here. As you know, I was the Secretary of Homeland Security, and obviously in that job, I had to be responsible for deciding on policies involving a whole range of things. For example, what the policies are for security, boarding an airplane, or other kinds of transportation. What the policies are with respect to immigration enforcement. What the policies are with respect to dealing with natural disasters. Since I left that position, I've been chairman of a consulting firm that does risk management. And in that capacity, we don't make policy, but we advise people on how to promote policy and how they ought to deal with policies.
Excited to be with you all today. I am Jamina Bernard, and President and Chief Operating Officer at Teach for America. And as I introduce myself, I'll start by just offering a little bit about my personal background. So I'm half Black, I'm half Puerto Rican. I grew up in the Mott Haven section of the South Bronx, which, if you're from the South Bronx, you're proud of being from the Mott Haven section. It's one of the poorest sections in all of New York City and all of the country. And I went to a mix of public and private schools in New York City. And it was through those experiences, and of course, through the love, support, and guidance of my family and lots of other adults, that I was able to have access to an excellent education, which has made all the difference in my life, right? So it led me to graduate from Yale University, from Columbia Business School. It propelled me to work across the private sector, the public sector, and now the nonprofit sector, and now have the privilege of sitting on this esteemed panel at the Aspen Institute. And I share that because it's what fuels me to be in the business of ensuring that all children in this country, especially ones that look like me and that are growing up in communities across the country that mirror my South Bronx roots, are able to, in fact, access and attain an excellent and equitable education. And that's what we're in the business of doing at Teach for America. And so when I think about how that relates to policy, right, for us, it is about really believing that teaching is the greatest act of leadership, right? If you can inspire and motivate and recruit the next generation of leaders, largely college students, college graduating seniors, to devote at least 2 years of their early career to teaching, that then is a transformative teaching in low-income communities throughout the country. They can do anything. They are successful, and we've been in this now for nearly 35 years. And so we've seen time and time again that through those experiences of getting proximate to the actual challenges, to the barriers, to the complexities that kids and educators face in low-income communities throughout the country, once you're successful helping your students and your schools be successful, you're forever changed. And you're inspired to keep at the work, either in education, staying in the classroom, staying in education, or moving on. And we now have a network of about 70,000 alumni, novice teachers, who we call our core members, and Ignite tutoring fellows. The majority of those stay in education, but about 3,000 of those alums are pursuing policy, advocacy, community organizing, and even we have about 300 who are sitting in elected official positions from school boards, ranging to 3 alums who are sitting in the halls of Congress right now. And so that to me is the initial link to policy and why I'm excited to be here today and talk about Teach for America's role with that.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see so many of your faces out there and to hear this amazing work that's going over here at the Aspen Policy Academy. I think this is outstanding. My name is Tony Johnson. I'm the president and CEO of the Truman National Security Project and the Truman Center for National Policy. And I have the privilege to lead a nationwide organization of national security and foreign policy leaders who are focused on the challenges that America faces today and tomorrow and in the future, and to prepare a generation of leaders, both now, next, and new, to shape the character and quality of American leadership on the global stage for the next 10, 20, 30 years. It's a big organization, and we are focused on national security and foreign policy. So we have a natural affinity with what the Aspen Policy Academy is doing. And I'm really happy to be with you here today to talk about these things. A little bit about my background that really resonates with me. Immediately before this job, I took this seat in August. I was the Senior Intelligence Advisor to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kathleen Hicks, who's the first woman, the first to lead the department at that level. And I've had the privilege to work across my 30-year career in the Defense Department, in the State Department, in the think tank world, in the national security space. And I promise you that my youthful good looks are not AI generated. But I'm looking forward to this conversation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Now, this might be a contentious question, but I think it's worth asking at the beginning of this panel, does policy matter anymore? One could argue that the last two presidential elections were decided on issues not related to policy. And by all accounts, this current election might not also be related to policy, decided based on policy. So I'd like if each of you can respond to that. Does policy matter anymore in today's political climate? Secretary Chertoff, let's start with you.
Well, I think it does matter. I mean, it's not always clear to me that the public understands the implications of policies or that the press is reporting in a clear way. But I mean, if you look at the polling that has been coming out in the last year, it looks like economic policy and immigration policy are very hot button issues. The challenge becomes explaining it in a way that is accessible to people and that also is honest and doesn't simply throw a lot of fairy dust at them. But certainly the policy is important, and when you're in office, how the policies work matter a lot in terms of people's view about your reelection.
Would you like to respond as well?
Sure. I mean, yes, I agree with everything that's been said. And, you know, I would offer that it continues to be surprising to me to some degree, given the business that I'm in. And yet I see it as an opportunity that education policy in particular rarely rises to the top of all the polls and what our elected officials and presidential nominees on both sides are really talking about. And so, you know, so I absolutely think it matters. The reason I say it's surprising is because, you know, we're still recovering from the pandemic, right? And I'm amazed at how when we were in the throes of COVID, right, everyone was talking about education to some degree because so many parents, regardless of your background, regardless of demographics, actually got to see firsthand how hard the life of an educator is, right? And so, you know, I would argue that to the earlier point, I would argue that we need opportunities like this too to just continue to reinforce the importance of making sure that working on, you know, reforming education at every level really continues to be a kitchen table conversation, a dining table, family conversation, and then also one that rises the ranks to affect policy change at the highest levels.
Tony, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think this is a really critical question because what policy is really the contextualization and the engineering of the solutions of the problems we face. Right? Otherwise, we have a lot of passion that people feel certain ways about things, but they don't really know how to solve the problems, right? And so you have to have a way to put those problems in a context and talk about what you're going to do about them. And then you have to have some kind of vehicle to implement those solutions, and that typically happens through government. So policy is important because it puts a framework around the problems and the issues that we have, gives us a language to talk about them and converse and figure out what we're going to do about those things. And it's the vehicle by which we go and seek to achieve the outcomes that we want. There's a historian, his name is Paul Johnson, and he talks about an American kind of propensity to will the outcome without thinking about the means. So we're thinking about what we want. We say we want it, but we don't really know how to get there. Policy is the conversation that talks about how we get there. And implementation, the effecting of that policy, is how we get to solutions that make an impact in the lives for Americans.
Thank you. Looks like we have a consensus. Policy does, in fact, still matter. I just want to press on this a little bit further, though. There's a lack of trust in our government right now. A recent poll from the Pew Research Center found that only 21% of Americans trust the federal government to do what's right most of the time. Does that concern you at all about the future of policymaking? And what can policymakers do to win back the trust of Americans? Secretary Chertoff, let's start with you again.
Well, I mean, it concerns me about the future of democracy. If you don't have trust and you can't agree on what facts are and what the truth is, it's very hard to have a serious policy discussion, because people who disagree with you will just simply say, no, 2 + 2 is not 4, it's 20. And then that shuts down everything. So, I mean, we need to have kind of a consistent understanding of what the facts are. Even when we disagree about the policy solution, the way to deal with that is to talk about the merits of the policy, not to simply deny that the issue is real or that there really is an illness or something of that sort. So I think this is a very serious challenge. It's one where educators have an important role to play, but I think everybody, including the media, needs to make sure that we're able to distinguish between matters about which opinion cause a disagreement and matters about hard fact, which we ought not to disagree about. We ought to simply accept and then work on our opinions based on the facts.
And I would say it concerns me, but frankly, it fuels me. It fuels me in this work that we do, in particular at Teach for America, when we think about the opportunity to really galvanize and mobilize Gen Z in particular, and soon forthcoming Gen Alpha right behind them, to not give up, right? To get in the arena, to, through us, obviously starting through education, but ultimately using that proximity to understand, again, the challenges, the complexities, the barriers facing low-income communities throughout this country, to use those experiences to fire themselves up and to get themselves fueled up to stay in the arena, whether, again, it's in education or moving on to policy positions and positions where they can affect change, not just in the schools, but also outside of the schools. And so, I'm really proud of the fact that, we sort of see our role in this in terms of using it as fuel and not just being not being down about the statistics and the realities of what you just named. In the last couple of years, we've managed to meet Gen Z where they're at, and we've grown our incoming core, novice teachers, by nearly 50% in the last couple of years. So again, when I think about fueling and having a sense of possibility in terms of the future, it makes us think at Teach for America that Gen Z wants to effect change. They want to believe in our institutions. They don't really believe in them right now, but the more we can galvanize their energy to get in the arena and then put that fuel and energy to help us restore and sustain our democracy and civility and all the things, the better off we'll be.
Tony, would you like to add anything there?
Sure. These two responses from my colleagues on stage resonate with me because it's about action and trying. And I happen to be Jewish, and in Judaism, we have a tenet called tikkun olam, to heal the world. And even if in your generation, in your life, you may not be able to achieve that goal, but you are required to try. You're not allowed to stop. And policy is about action and trying and working to fix problems and issues. And I think, people, if Americans don't understand the issue or the problem, you have to talk to them about it. We've all had a piece of technology that we open the box and we're like, I'm not sure how that thing's going to work. but I'm going to give it my trust and I'm going to try to do it. When I'm old enough to remember the razor and the iPhone switch, right? And you had to open the box. You had to trust that this new thing was going to work, and you had to decide between Windows and Apple and what that's. But it was about the conversation that happened between those companies and the American consumers that we're having, that made those things ubiquitous in our lives, and that we understand. And now we're more comfortable with them, and so we can't get by without policies or solutions to our problems or questions. So we have to continue to have that conversation. So the question, sorry, the long way of getting around to what can policymakers do to get Americans' trust back, is to be transparent about what issues they're trying to address and transparent about the ways in which they're trying to address them. And we have elections that decide which choices people make about which pathway they want to take.
And with that in mind, what do you all view as the most pressing needs in our country that we need to focus on right now to create equitable and sustainable policy solutions? Companies and governments alike are struggling with how to ethically deploy artificial intelligence. School districts are debating whether to fund more charter schools. What key issues should we be prioritizing in order to create lasting change? Tony, let's start with you this time.
Ooh, I get to go first. I think civic education is hugely important, right? The understanding that I just finished talking about, like what are we talking about? What are we going to do about it? How does this thing work? What are the issues? What are the perspectives? I think for too long, increasingly Americans don't understand how government works, how it touches their everyday lives at the local level, let alone the national level, right? And so we get pushed into these passion arguments, and the understanding of the mechanics of it is opaque, is increasingly opaque to folks. I grew up on I'm Just a Bill and Schoolhouse Rock and things like that, conjunction junction. I learned grammar and how to make a law, how a law becomes a bill. Those kinds of things were very, very powerful tools for creating a baseline of understanding in the United States for how government works. I think a return to that, that is bipartisan, that talks about the mechanics of government, irrespective of party, is fundamental to our ability to have equity and equitable conversations about the direction of this country and the future of our nation and our society.
I mean, I'll sound like a broken record. I mean, the issue, that I most care about and deeply believe we all should care about is obviously related to education. And so much as, our country can't thrive if we don't actually ensure that our nation's future leaders and our current students are positioned to lead, right? To learn, to lead, to thrive, to co-create futures of possibility for themselves and those around them, right? My vision is that, the students sitting in classrooms across the country, especially those that are in the most marginalized communities, those not yet attaining access to excellent education, will one day actually be the ones sitting on this panel, right? Will be the ones sitting in your seats, right? And so when I think about what it could take for us to achieve that, then ultimately I think fundamentally we need to continue to prioritize two key things I sort of think about. One is being really present to the reality that our public schools today aren't designed to meet the needs of our current students, our current workforce needs. When we think about AI and we think about technology, we're not yet at scale really training and teaching our kids to be prepared for the jobs of 2030, the jobs that we don't even know what they're going to be, right? So I think about how do we tackle that, right? And then I also, again, thinking about the work that we need to do to get current future generations of leaders to get in the arena of this work in particular. I think about how, from a policy level, we can reduce the barriers of entry to becoming teachers, becoming educators, right? Increasing federal AmeriCorps awards. I was at a Peace Corps event this morning where we're constantly talking about things like that. How do we make it financially sustainable and attractive to actually join and be a public school teacher, right? So many of our first and second year teachers, when you talk to them, many of them have to have 2 jobs, 2 and 3 jobs, just to make ends meet. And on our end, we put our money where our mouth is. We've been making about $16 million worth of investments in grants and stipends and in some cases loans to make it more feasible and attractive for folks right out of college to get into to get into education. But it's things like that that keep me up at night with regards to thinking about how might we move even more quickly to reduce the barriers of entry for our educators, for people to actually get into the teaching force, and then how might we move even more quickly to reimagine what the future of teaching and learning could look like and actually make our schools more present to the realities of what we need them to be for our kids.
Well, I agree with those observations. I would simply add, I think our leaders and people who are experts and who are looked to as experts need to pay attention to the clarity, honesty, and context of the statements they make. I think one of the things that undercuts people's faith in government and people's faith in expertise is when ambiguous statements are made that then ultimately wind up being refuted or at least questionable. And there's a tendency sometimes for experts to talk in shorthand because they know other experts understand the context. But when you're talking to the general public, that doesn't necessarily work. Let me give you an example. When we were in the midst of COVID, which I know is still going on, there were statistics being put out in the media by public health authorities about the number of people who were hospitalized with COVID. Now, here's a question. What does that mean, actually? Do we mean they're hospitalized because they have COVID and it's serious? Or do they include people who broke their leg, but when they're going to the hospital, they're tested, and oh, by the way, you have asymptomatic COVID? Well, that's a huge difference in terms of the severity and seriousness of the illness. But by not being clear sometimes, and maybe sometimes overstating in order to make things seem more serious and thereby get more government support, it led to a certain cynicism about reporting concerning these statistics. So I think this precision and fidelity to what the language actually means is an important element for our leaders and our educators to keep in mind when they speak to the public.
And that brings us perfectly to the role of the Aspen Policy Academy. Addressing these challenges that you all mentioned requires us to come up with innovative solutions. I'm curious your thoughts on how a policy academy like this one, focused on training subject matter experts, can help drive impactful societal change. In other words, why should experts be in this conversation? Why should they have a seat at the table? Why should they be a part of this conversation? Secretary Chertoff, let's start with you.
Well, I think that what is useful for experts to understand is how to translate expertise into something that has impact on actual results in the real world. Some of that is understanding the mechanics of the policymaking process. Some is understanding the pitfalls about how one presents policy so that you don't wind up undercutting yourself. And some of it is a question of the practicality of how you enter into the policymaking arena and deploy your expertise. And I think if we do want to have good judgment, accuracy, and understanding at the core of our policymaking, it is important to have people with the technical expertise to convey what the facts really are.
Jamina?
Yeah, now I'd say just building off of that, it's important to ensure that the people most proximate to the challenges and that we're facing, whichever industry or sector you might be coming from or wherever your professional expertise might lie, have the seat at the table to get that kind of training, to get that kind of support, in order to frankly accelerate the level of impact that we can have, both in terms of accelerating the ability to restore confidence in public institutions and the role that policy can play, and so forth and so on. And so, when I think about the Academy launch in particular, I get excited because I think about how much our core members and alums, once they actually, have that proximity and have that experience, how much we are constantly looking for partners to help, fuel their talent, energy, their proximity into whatever career or passion that they want to pursue long term. And I think the more we're able to partner in these ways, the more we can all accelerate our collective impact and really drive change.
Let me take a simple approach to this. It takes practice. Truman does this with national security and foreign policy leaders. The Aspen Policy Academy does this. Making policy is not easy. And experts in particular, whose entire careers depend upon their integrity and their credibility and their ability to communicate those things effectively, are wonks like me, right? They're wonky people. And so making policy, researching it, and talking about it are two different skill sets, right? And it's important to know how to do both. Secretary Chertoff has been a policymaker. I've been an advisor, a very senior advisor to very senior policymakers while they're sitting in the room doing those things. And and I've also been a professor, teaching adjunct at Georgetown. And the two most terrifying things to me are the first evening you stand up in front of your class and you think, whatever I tell them, that's what they're going to do. So I better get it right. Or sitting down next to the deputy secretary or secretary and thinking, whatever comes to my mouth, that's going to influence their decisions or his decision, right? So I got to get it right. How do I talk about it? How do I write about it? How do I get it to them in a way that they give me direction that then gets translated into the piece of direction, memo, or paper mechanism by which the department or the agency or the government or the organization then affects the change that we want? And then how do we talk about it to the people who it's going to impact down at the other end? You can't just do that by magic. There's no Harry Potter about it, right? There's practice, and there's methodology and instruction, and there's getting to know the people that you're talking to in the space, and then reaching out and talking to them about it. And that's the kind of thing that we do at Truman, and that's the kind of thing that you do here at the Aspen Policy Academy.
So Secretary Chertoff, reflecting on your time at DHS, I'm curious if you can share a specific instance of a time where expert input significantly shaped a policy decision during a crisis. And are there any lessons we can learn from that experience to enhance future policymaking processes?
Yeah, I mean, expert opinion really mattered a lot in setting policy. So, I'll give you an example. Some of you will remember the airline bomb plot of 2006. This was a plot generated in the United Kingdom by terrorists to blow up between 10 and 12 airliners leaving Heathrow Airport and flying to North America. And what they planned to do was take sports bottles of sports drink, take hypodermic needles and drain the actual drink, and then inject it with an explosive formula that could then be lit and would blow up or seriously damage an airplane. We discovered the plot, we were able to frustrate it, but it raised an issue about, do we tell people you can never bring any liquid on a plane again at all, period. That's where expertise mattered, scientific expertise about what is a reasonable limit that would essentially eliminate or very much reduce the risk, but would still allow people to bring like toothpaste onto an airplane, or something that's like a hand sanitizer and stuff like that. So there's a case where matters of life and death were resolved because expertise allowed us to come up with a policy that was balanced rather than too far tipped one way or the other.
Thank you for that. And Tony and Jamina, going back to my earlier question about distrust in government and not believing our policymakers will do what's right for this country, a lot of these people feel that policy change is driven by those with established connections or the most money or the most political influence. But what role can regular citizens play in shaping policy decisions? How can educators, researchers, advocates contribute to and benefit from participating in the policy process?
First of all, those things are all true. Money does matter. Connections do matter. Influences does matter. I think we have to acknowledge the fact that those things are present in our environment and absolutely necessary. They're just part of the policy-making apparatus. Regular citizens, you have one power that all those others, that everybody else has. It's a superpower. It's called voting. right? You get to pick the people who are going to sit in the chairs, who are going to make those decisions, and you have to. This is a participatory democracy. We live in a pluralistic society, and you have to go and participate. You have to educate yourself on the issues. You have to ask questions. You have to go talk to your representative. You have to go talk to your city council person, and you have to run, right? So that's the there is no silver bullet for this. It's called get involved. It's called understand. It's called ask. It's called talk to your neighbors. We can no longer sit in our silos as Americans and expect for our country to continue on a successful trajectory. It takes all of us. It always has. And so I think the answer to that question is get involved in the democracy, do your civic duty, educate yourself about how the country works, and then get involved and participate in that.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I completely agree with everything Tony just said. What I'll build upon in terms of, you know, the idea of talking to your neighbor and getting in conversations, I often tell my own staff, and I tell our core members, and I tell our alums to just constantly seek to be curious, right? And to not just talk to your neighbors that you sort of know are going to agree with what